Hello, Mr. Trump. My name is Lloyd Brunson. You've inspired. I'm over here on your right. Mr. Ron Paul, when he was running for president, there was a lot of confusion about the Federal Reserve. He said stuff that sounded crazy, like 1.6 trillion of the debt was fictitious. And I saw him on Fox News talking about that. And Lori Rothman, an analyst, said, "Oh, that's not fictitious. That belongs to the financial markets." And that seemed to prove his point. So could you address that issue a little bit and see if you could?
Well, it's a good point. We have a tremendous problem.
Can you do what JFK and President Abraham Lincoln did, and that's take the power to create money back to the government, and that would eliminate taxation?
Well, you have to do, I mean, you have to bring everything back.
What would you do if you were president of the United States?
If I were president of the United States, I would try to establish a proportional 15% across the board flat tax. I would also establish a foreign policy that was based on the Reagan doctrine, which is simply, we don't invade other countries. Other people fight for their own freedom. They fight. We can help. And I would try to have power decentralized as much as possible to states and local communities so that people can live in what Hayek called the framework of competing utopias.
Briefly, if you were president, what would you do?
Shrink the government by 7/8.
If you were president, what would you do in like one sentence?
I would get rid of the IRS, get rid of the Fed, and give America her freedom again.
Get rid of the IRS, get rid of the Fed, and give America her freedom again. I watched Fox News one too many times, and I saw our president declare to the world that the Constitution of the United States is fundamentally flawed. I had to look at his oath, and I want to read you the congressional oath, which is very similar to his oath, and that is the job description for a U.S. senator. This is what all U.S. senators, new senators, have to swear to, the oath. I, Lloyd Brunson, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office in which I'm about to enter, so help me God. Did President Obama take an honest oath? When I read this, tears came to my eyes. I couldn't believe it. And it changed my life, because from then on I felt I had to study the Constitution and understand it. I discovered that the Constitution is a contract with 7 articles, and the first 10 amendments are not just the Bill of Rights, but they are declared by Congress as further declaratory and restrictive clauses to the Constitution. The First Amendment, separation of church and state. We see people on television like Bill Maher say, what about the separation of church and state in the Constitution? Well, those words, as you know, do not exist in the Constitution. Amendment 2, the Second Amendment, it's not just about arms. If we refer to Article 1, Section 8, and we read the militia clause, we'll see that the Congress has the power to raise funds and discipline the militia. Well, who is the militia? Every able-bodied person that is capable of joining, every U.S. citizen joining the militia. And what is the purpose of the militia? It is to execute the laws of the Union. And what is the laws of the Union? It is the Constitution of the United States. So the Congress, thank you. The Congress has the power to discipline and arm the militia, which means not only do citizens have a right to bear arms that are military quality, but they are entitled to the government paying for them and disciplining, training them in the use of them. That's the Constitution. Now I'm publishing a Constitution booklet. This is the most advanced Constitution booklet you can get. It makes all other Constitution booklets obsolete, basically. It's endorsed by Ron Mann, who was President Ronald Reagan's director of his transition team, and he has endorsed it. And some of my discoveries in this include one of my favorites, and that is I have found the interpretation clause.
When a government or an administration puts forth a policy that takes away our civil liberties, and our name, the United States, does things that we are fundamentally against as a nation, then every person that doesn't stand up and scream, "Stop it, don't do this to my country," is complicit.
Do you believe, understand, and live by the Constitution of the United States? If not, you should. This information is very important to all U.S. citizens. Allow us to explain some basic information about government. There are two main schools of thought. One is to have as little government control as possible, and the other is to have total government control over every aspect of human life. Then there are many positions in between those two schools of thought, which is where we find most Americans. Let's first consider total government control. The government makes decisions and laws and uses force or punishment for those who do not abide. This type of government is called totalitarian, and heads of this type of government are called kings, tyrants, emperors, dictators, and warlords. Before 1788, most all governments were of this type. There were some modified versions of totalitarian government, such as in England, where they had a parliament that enables some input from a group called lords and some representation for the common people. In reality, the king ruled with guidance from his advisors, and most of the people obeyed his laws. In 1788, 7 years after the Revolutionary War, the Constitution of the United States was approved and accepted by the sovereign states and became the law of our country. Our Constitution was very different from any government in the world because it was based on having very little government. The federal government was then charged with the responsibility to protect the people's unalienable rights, given from our Creator, along with 17 other specific tasks outlined in the Constitution. The people of the United States were not only free and well organized, they were also protected from their own government through the Constitution. By 1905, 117 years later, the United States had become the most prosperous nation in the world. What does this tell us? When people are free from totalitarian government, they're happier, personally successful, prosperous, and have a greater standard of living through advances in technology, science, medicine, and arts. The people's responsibility under our Constitution is to be law-abiding, to elect good, honest people with wisdom, intelligence, and experience in many diverse fields. People with a great appreciation and understanding of the principles used to formulate our United States Constitution. Imagine if all citizens understood the Constitution and would elect representatives who upheld the Constitution. Unfortunately, that's not how it is. But it can be. Article 6 requires our representatives to be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of which I am about to enter. So help me God. Therefore, the laws passed are required to be constitutional. But are they? Here's a simple rule to follow. Any law passed which allows our government to do something that you as an individual don't have the right to do, that law is unconstitutional. The only rights you can delegate to your representatives are the unalienable rights you have, not the rights you don't have. You don't have the right to take possessions from one group of people and give them to another. That is stealing.
Are we seeing socialism in America now? It's unbelievable how much socialism there is in America. It seems that people don't realize that government can't steal. The 10 Commandments, the 8th commandment doesn't say, thou shalt not steal unless you gang up on your neighbor. Then you can through legislation. And so Frederick Bachet said it beautifully. He said that the law should be the collective organization of the individual right to lawful defense. The individual right. So a group of people does not have the right, even if they call themselves a government, no matter how big the group is, to take someone's property and give it to someone else. And it doesn't need to because it has the power to create money. So all government spending could be funded by simply retaining that precious power to create money without taxation, without the need to borrow. We see a lot of theft going on, and I think it's easy for honest people to understand that a group of people should never have the right to take from one who has, who earned it, and give to another. The only redistribution of wealth that would be constitutional, I believe, is the assets acquired through fractional banking and through the creation of money by the shareholders of the Federal Reserve. I think the government would have the constitutional power to redistribute that wealth, but then it should go back to the Treasury and then be distributed amongst the taxpayers and the taxpayers' parents and their parents or forefathers who have paid taxes. And it should be interest and penalties attached. There should be interest and penalties attached to that refund. So that would be the only constitutional redistribution of wealth that I could imagine. But it would be a tremendous amount. It could help us prosper tremendously. We would see an industrial and economic and prosperity revolution like the world has never seen because of the technologies we have and the resources we have. It would be unbelievable. The headlines would be, instead of 8.5% unemployment or more, it would be along the lines of, wow, another great business had to close its doors because everyone's working and there aren't enough people to go to work because everyone has jobs already. So it would be a great place.
Senator Dorgan has spoke out on the secrecy of the Federal Reserve System. There is no entity in the world that controls our lives more than the Federal Reserve System. What the Federal Reserve Board does, nobody knows what they're doing.
We have a privately owned central bank system disguised as a government-owned system.
There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
It gives them the ability to print money in a way that the insiders are protected and everybody else is trained.
No matter where you go in the world, he who controls the money controls the world.
16 trillion, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Taxes and interest from shore to shore. The Federal Reserve owns the company store. Thank you. It really is true, folks. If we don't understand that and we don't address that issue, all other issues become impossible to solve. We need help. And where are we going to get that help besides ourselves? This is a tough problem. Well, the Constitution contains the answers to all issues if we study the document. The Declaration of Independence gives us clues and answers as well. The signers of the Declaration, all of them, said that they could not have established this, the greatest country in 5,000 years, without the help of God, without the help of the divine hand of providence. And I say to my friends that don't believe in God, it's irrelevant. Whether you believe in God or not does not change the truth, the fact that believing in Him works. Now, how do we interpret the Constitution? Thank you. There are 4 references to God in the Declaration of Independence, and there are 2 references to God in the Constitution. So how do we interpret the Constitution? The Declaration of Independence tells us how to do that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we have unalienable rights from our Creator. For 4.5 months, the signers of the Constitution deliberated and debated and fought over every word within the document and its connected definitions. And they still all signed on to Article 7. Article 7 tells us who the God of the Declaration of Independence is, and who the God of the Constitution is, and who the God of this country is. Those 2 words are there in Article 7 telling us who it is. Our Lord. The 9th Amendment is the voice of God, in my opinion, telling us how to interpret the document. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. No construing the document in favor of federal government at the expense of the unalienable rights of the people. That is the voice of God.